Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming. Many greetings also to our online guests. I heard there are about a dozen of people in the audience. I'm very happy to greet for the first time at Wangzhong Institute Professor David Andolfatto, who studied Asian archaeology at Marc Bloch University in Strasbourg and at the Paris Sorbonne. And will present on his research that has to do with archaeology, history, art history of Nepal, and of course, especially Kathmandu, and as I heard, especially after the earthquake. So from 2015 to 2018, David worked as a consultant for the UNESCO Kathmandu Office. And during that period, you conducted archaeological excavations on heritage sites and coordinated different preservation projects. Your PhD is on archaeology of West Nepal, and this led you to all these historical sites about which we will hear more tonight. I'm very excited, and thank you very much for coming. And with no further ado, let's start the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. I'm sorry, I'm gonna read because I'm always afraid of missing some parts. First off, I have to mention that two of my UNESCO co-workers of the post-earthquake operations are here, Thomas Schrom and Renu Mahajan, both architects, and they both contributed to this project in one way or another. So before starting, I must also convey my gratitude to Father Gregory Sharkey, who's not here, but he invited me to this prestigious institution. And thank you to the Wangzhong Yeshe Institute for hosting this guest lecture. So my topic of today is about the Maṅgal Bahudvāra Caitya, which is a Tashi Gomang Stūpa located on the Svayambhū hill of Kathmandu. The archaeological excavation of this monument took place in the aftermath of the 2015 earthquake. And I had the chance of leading the project on behalf of the UNESCO office in Kathmandu in collaboration with Nepal's Department of Archaeology and the local Buddhist community of Svayambhū. So to give you a bit of context, I have here an illustration of the basin resonance of the earthquake of April 25. It shows the amplitude of the tremor's frequency and how much things moved on the surface. Starting slowly. So as you can see indicated by the dots, it reached east, west, and north-south amplitudes of almost 2 meters, meaning that living beings and monuments went through a tremendous physical displacement. In terms of human loss, the event caused the death of nearly 9,000 people and injured some 22,000 individuals. In the built heritage sector, the post-disaster needs assessment that was partially written by Thomas Schrom here. This report estimated that nearly 19,000 monuments had been damaged or lost. And this is how Svayambhū looked like right after the earthquakes. As you can see, most of the monuments have been severely affected by it. One of UNESCO's first mission in Svayambhū was to map the site's damages in order to get a better understanding of the situation. This damage mapping was conducted by a team of volunteer French architects and Nepali engineer. Here's the general map that was produced by the team. As one can see there are a lot of monuments in red and blue, which indicates that they are either very damaged or totally collapsed. The document is particularly important as it allowed the identification of areas that are prone to landslides. Some 30 families dwell in Svayambhū, and the presence of long cracks in the pavement were undoubtedly cause for worry in the aftermath of the earthquake, especially with tremors that kept coming and going, and with the constant threat of an earthquake of even greater magnitude that was looming. In one of the potential landslide areas is the Temple of Shantipur, one of Kathmandu Valley's most important Buddhist shrine. The monument was still standing but withstood severe damages, in particular in its mural paintings. Here's the vestibule south wall, where passages from the Svayambhū Puran, the Buddhist mythical story of Kathmandu Valley, are depicted below a large image of Padmaniteshvar. This is after the earthquake. Approximately 30% of the mural's upper part is missing. We thus had to salvage what had fallen from the walls and safely shift it to the National Museum. And almost a year later, we were able to bring in Rodolfo Lohan, a mural conservation expert, a team comprising employees from the Department of Archaeology, from the National Museum, and from the Svayambhū community was trained by Mr. Lohan. Together, they successfully removed paintings from the walls and provided them initial conservation treatments. As we speak, the paintings are still sitting at the National Museum, and the walls of the Shantipur temple are still blank. And actually today, I just had a meeting with the director of Charney Museum to discuss about what can be done to, like, what's the solution to move forward, make new paintings in the temple and keep the old ones at the National Museum seems to be the way that the local community chose so far. I should extend this introductory overview by mentioning the most iconic monument of Svayambhū, which are the towers of Patapur and Anantapur, and the Svayambhū Stūpa itself. Fortunately, the Stūpa suffered no extensive damages, although they still had to do some renovations in the upper part. Originally built in 1654 by King Pratap Malla, the Anantapur and Patapur Shikara towers were either totally demolished or severely damaged to the point that it required a complete dismantling. There too, it was deemed necessary to produce architectural drawings based on the available documentation in order to facilitate both monuments' future reconstruction. So let me now return to the monument that interests us, the Tashi Gomang Stūpa. It is situated to the southwest of the main stupa, as you can see here in green. And this is the stupa before and after the earthquake. Its upper structure was completely destroyed, leaving only a mound of dust, bricks, and stones. But we quickly realized that amid the rubble were numerous artifacts of various sizes and types. So our first goal was to salvage what had spilled out of the structure and stabilize what was left of it. The removal of unstable material from the monument led us to uncover a first level of 9 cavities that were covered by uncarved stones. And here's a drone view to the left of these 9 cavities, or navakundas, at the end of our first campaign in June 2015. These cavities are an interesting feature since they create a mandala that can be related to the 9 precious gems, the Navaratna. And this is an element that was also encountered in a larger scale in the foundations of Kasta Mandap, the famous monument that gave its name to Kathmandu, and that was excavated by Robin Cunningham's team in 2015. Inside these cavities were coins, miniature vessels, and tsatsas. So tsatsa, I mean, I'm not teaching anything to anybody here. It's a Tibetan term used for small clay objects in the shape of miniature stupas or tablets with representations of divinities. These objects are usually produced in large quantities during Buddhist rituals for the karmic benefits of its makers. As we shall see, they are also made in a funerary context. Now the tsatsas that was found in cavity number 4, representing the goddess Vajrabhai, is very unique in Newar context because it is painted. It was recovered in multiple pieces that were quickly put back together for the picture. Another Vajrabhai, this time in stone, was found next to it in the central cavity. Oh, I misplaced the square, but it was in the center, along with an image of Amitabha Buddha. The second campaign took place a year later, in 2016. The remains of the monument had to be protected between the 2 phases of work. A shed was installed on top and a fence around it. Unfortunately, the fence was quickly destroyed and the place became an occasional shelter for tourists oblivious of what they were sitting on. Another threat to the structure were the long-tailed macaques who conducted their own archaeological work and searched for insects. In some cases, they even broke up the clay artifacts, the tsatsas, to eat rice grains that were ritually inserted in it. The aim of the 2016 campaign was to excavate the stupa down to a level that was structurally sound enough and from which the reconstruction could start. For this campaign, I was helped by 7 Buddhacharya priests, who are the caretakers of Svayambhū, and my colleague Bhaskar Gyawali represented the Department of Archaeology. But before anything could start, a ritual of asking forgiveness, or Kshama Puja, had to be performed in front of the monument. During this ritual, at a moment called Jivanyasa Likayegu Puja, the deity residing in the stupa is transferred out of it through a guiding string into a holy vessel. The deity will be put back in place later during the final ritual steps, once that the monument is rebuilt. Resuming our work, where we left it, we came across an architectural mandala of particular interest that was built below the 9 cavities. It was constituted of 4 L-shaped cavities that were sealed on top by reused bricks, and inside the cavities were filled with tsatsas. As can be seen on the table, we unearthed 500 kilos of tsatsas from the mandala structure, which represents an estimated minimal number of some 120,000 objects. In total, the excavation found more than 1.5 tons of tsatsas, corresponding to approximately 241,000 artifacts. Part of our work here also entailed the inventory of the different types of tsatsas. They were hence sorted out by iconographies and types of molds used, but kept together by archaeological context. This allowed the identification of at least 53 distinct types of chaityas and historiated tablets. Although in some cases a mold was used to produce a single tsatsa, as it is the case with the large painted Bajavai. We then come to the base of the mandala structure, which was constructed with bricks and uncut stones encased in the mandala's gates. They are marked here in orange. Other stone blocks in red, this time carved, were placed on the edges of the structure. They contain sockets for the insertion of tenons from the facade sculptures, on which I will return in a moment. And at the center of the monument was also a 2 meters deep conduit connecting the central upper cavity to the foundations. I have noticed this type of central cavity on other monuments, such as the nearby Anantapur Tower, where its foundations were dismantled before the reconstruction. The workers in charge of the dismantlement made sure to keep the small cavity visible and provided different explanation for its presence. One of these explanations is especially stimulating. Religious monuments go through a series of rituals aiming at bringing life into them, giving them a name, or asking the monument for forgiveness when doing a restoration and work on it. The architecture is thus instilled with life. As such, I was told by these informants that the central cavity is a feature that allowed the monument to breathe. I have so far not been able to find textual references to ascertain or invalidate this emic explanation, but maybe some of you may have ideas about it. Below the mandala was a rectangular cavity, 90 centimeters deep and also filled with tsatsas. The top of the cavity was covered by carefully laid charred wooden beams. We got a radiocarbon dating for one of these beams, which yielded a 95% probability of dating between 1445 and 1632 CE. I will get back to the stupa's dating in a moment, but let us now move on to the final stage of the excavation, illustrated on these images. As you can see, we have now reached the platform level from which the reconstruction was to begin. To the right is a 3D rendering of the structure with the different inner cavities in orange. Besides large quantities of tsatsas, the monument also contained an array of artifacts of various origins and periods, all of them conveying a sense of economic and cultural wealth. This is illustrated by this beautiful gilt copper curtain of Tibetan style, which was the first object to be salvaged and inventoried in 2015. It was found amidst the rubbles by Svayambhū priest right after the earthquake. Another artifact in gilt metal was found in the debris. It is the statue of a Buddhist master that remains unidentified for the moment. A striking feature of the object is its physical condition. As indicated by the folded base and markings on the face, it appears that the statue was at some point bent by metal pincers. The reasons for this volunteer damaging are yet to be identified, and maybe some of you have ideas as to why people would enshrine a vandalized religious image. One should also mention the jewelries, including pearls of amber, coral, agate, and moonstone, earrings, and a Z-bead that were discovered throughout the excavation. About 40 coins were salvaged or uncovered during the excavation. Most of them were issued by Malay kings of the Kathmandu Valley and were unfortunately in an advanced state of corrosion, impeding the identification of their issuers. In addition to these coins, were also Chinese ones from Qing Emperor Qianlong, quarter annas of Queen Victoria, as well as silver rupees from Mughal Emperor Shah Alam II. These few objects were made over a span of 2 centuries and originate from local and foreign realms. As the next artifact will show, they reflect the cultural connection of the person for whom the stupa was erected. As we have seen, the objects placed inside the stupa are for the most dating from the 17th to the 19th century. The terminus antiquem of this chronological window is provided by a very important artifact discovered amid the rubble. It is an inscribed copper reliquary casket that still contains ashes and bone fragments. The Newari text running on the casket's lid bears a set of information that archaeologists rarely come across. It tells us when and for whom the monument was erected. Let us read it. May it be auspicious, the yantra of thrice blessed Maṅgal Caitya has been established in the name of one's father by Harsha Ratna, the son of Dharmasima, who was descended from the clan of Tamrakar, and who is the incarnation of Manjubhajacharya. Later, if anybody has to make change in this place, it should be kept like as it is. Witnesses are blessed Mahakal and the family of Harati. If anyone makes it different, he will be viewed with evil eyes by blessed ones, meaning Mahakal and Harati. One who builds it as previous, he will be viewed with good eyes. He will get fruit of it. It was established in the good era dating 995, Jesta, waning moon 10, weekday 2nd. So once converted, the date corresponds to June 28, 1875. This Dharmasima or Dhanasima Tamrakar is no random person, as the might of his memorial stupa already indicates. We know that he was a Newar merchant involved in trade between Kathmandu, Tibet, and China, and that he held a diplomatic position between these regions. When in Kathmandu, he resided in the large compound of Yetka Bahal to the northwest of the Durbar Square. There, on the ground floor of his house, Dhanasima Tamrakar built a private shrine. The shrine inherited his name as it is called Dhanasim Bahal. It is worth noting here that this is a rather unique situation, since the place contains a consecrated Kwapadya, or main deity, which is exceptional for a private shrine. A stone inscription is embedded on one of the walls. An Licchavi-style stone chaitya is installed in the center of the shrine room. The inscription records that a merchant named Dhanasima Tamrakar established this Baha in 1862 CE in his own house, and he offered this house to the Svayambhū Chaitya and Vajrayogini. Dhanasima Tamrakar is thus one of the so-called Lhasa Newar, a Newar trader and adventurer trading goods between Nepal and Tibet. According to Nepalese historian Hemraj Shakya, Dhanasima Tamrakar was a proficient diplomat and canny merchant who spent extended time in China, where he held a high government post. It is also said that he was trusted by King Surendrabhikram Shah of Nepal. It is upon his return in Nepal that he renovated the Svayambhū Stūpa in 1863, employing, as Hemraj Shakya describes it, many skilled artists and workers from China. The cosmopolitan status and wealth of Dhanasima may thus explain the variety of objects that were inherited from the stupa. To some extent, his connection with Tibet and its cultures would explain why the monument was built following the concept of a Tashi Gomang. The Newar name given to it, Maṅgal Caitya, the auspicious Chaitya, is in itself a partial translation of Tashi Gomang, the stupa of many auspicious doors. But a closer look at the artifacts reveals an important information. As you can see, a section of the lower part of the casket is folded. To my understanding, this is not the result of the earthquake's violence, but rather an intentional act aiming at investigating the content of the reliquary. What this tells us is that at some point after its consecration in 1875, at least a part of the stupa's upper section was accessible to people, and that these people, for some reason, must have taken a peek at the caskete's content. This would thus indicate that it was most probably renovated in the late 19th century or during the first half of the 20th century. Yet other elements lead us to consider that the Tamrakars may in fact have repurposed a much older stupa. While excavating, we came across a dozen terracotta sculptures of great refinement. Interestingly, while most of them had tenons, they were usually placed inside within the masonry. Now, the niches on the facades of the stupa contain 124 stone sculptures of the Panchabuddha vehicles, the Chatur Maharajas, or the Ashtamangalas. The terracotta sculptures have the same iconography, and their locations inside the monument duplicated that of stone sculptures on the facade. This drawing was made by Rajman Chitrakar, one of the artists that British resident Brian Hodgson hired between 1820 and 1843. It shows a stupa from Gopuch, a Newari name of Svayambhū hill. Its layout is identical with our Tashi Gomang, with the exception that one level of niches is missing and that the niches contain almost no sculptures. Maybe because the artist didn't bother to represent all of them, or that it actually didn't contain that many sculptures. Whatever it is, it then becomes apparent that an earlier stupa existed before 1875, and one may suggest that its facades were decorated with terracotta sculptures that were later enwalled. The central image in the drawing represents the Chatur Maharaja Vaishravana Kubera, who protects the Norse. He is identified here with the umbrella held in his right hand, and in theory, but it is missing from the drawing, by a mongoose. A quick comparison with its corresponding version in stone reveals that they do not match on one detail. The drawing's deity is sitting on a single row of lotus petals, while the one from the facade is on a double row. On the other hand, the terracotta statue of the same god that was found in the monument's rubbles is sitting on a single row of lotus petals. These are just minor details. Oh, I can't read. No worries. Yeah, that's good. Yep. So these are just minor details, but they tend to infer the hypothesis of a pre-Tamrakar structure with terracotta statues on its facades, in the like of the Patan Mahabuddha and Mayadevi temples that were built in the second half of the 16th century. The stone sculptures currently occupying the niches present a less refined style typical of 19th century productions. The identification of their iconography was crucial for their future relocation as we were excavated to later rebuild. Although difficult at first, it eventually became possible to identify what some of them represented by comparing them with an 18th century manuscript kept at the Los Angeles County Museum, and that was published by Gudrun Bunnemann. This manuscript contains line drawings describing the mudras and asanas that ritual officiants must execute when visualizing specific divinities. The textual reference for this manual comes from the Kriya Samgraha, a work written by the Nepalese Kuladatta between the 11th and the 13th century. But in some cases, the identification is complicated by the different rendering of certain divinities' visualization. And so most of the stone images are still to identify. The stone statue from the facade had a similar terracotta version enwalled in the masonry. An engraving in the back of this beautiful terracotta indicates that we're in presence of Vajramukhi. Nevertheless, the very peculiar gesture, where the character is bringing two Vajras to its mouth, is not found on the corresponding line drawing. Instead, the officiant is depicted holding a small figure, which is actually more reminiscent of Sitala or Harati. Going back to the burnt wooden beams that I have showed earlier, We know that Dhammasima Tamrakar was a generous donor and that he contributed to one of Svayambhū's many renovations. Our best guess now is that these wooden beams are architectural elements coming from a monument restored by Dhammasima Tamrakar, and possibly the main stupa itself. It is reported that Dhammasima Tamrakar passed while circumambulating the Svayambhū stupa. This, together with his financial support to the site, would explain why a lay person got its memorial stupa built in such a privileged ad sanctos location. Furthermore, the great quantity of tatsas found in the Tashi Gomang Stūpa indicates the observance of a Laka Chaitya Vrata, or observance of making 100,000 clay chaityas, a custom still observed in Newar Buddhist communities after the passing of an individual, and often found depicted in pauvas. One aim of this ritual activity is to produce 100,000 or 120,000 clay chaityas or clay tablets. These are then enshrined inside a stupa that then becomes a votive funerary monument. We're thus here in front of a Tibetan-inspired architecture housing elements of Newar Buddhism. To sum up the monument's history, it is possible to suggest that a stupa identical to the one that collapsed in 2015 already existed in the first half of the 19th century. As it appears in a drawing made by, between 1820 and 1843. The facade of its earlier monument was adorned by exquisite terracotta sculptures. The material and style of these sculptures is reminiscent of the late 16th century productions seen elsewhere in the valley. Our original stupa may thus date from the late 16th to the late 18th century. Sorry, I'm tired. The family of Dhammasima Tamrakar would then have partly or totally dismantled it in 1875. On that occasion, they placed the old terracotta sculptures inside the newly rebuilt structure, together with artifacts that may already have been placed in it, and the new ones brought by them. Thousands of clay statues were made during a Laka Chaitya ritual and enshrined in the monument with Dhammasima Tamrakar's reliquary casket. After 1875, potentially in the aftermath of the 1934 earthquake, the stupa was yet again rebuilt, but most probably only in its upper part. It is at this moment that people must have tried to investigate the reliquary casket. I shall now turn to the reconstruction of the monument, a phase that was initiated in 2017 with the financial patronage of the UNESCO office in Kathmandu. The excavation was stopped when we reached the level of the stupa's platform that you can see on screen now, as it was considered sound enough to start the construction from. Footnote, actually, when I left for a holiday, the priest from Svayambhū that trained in archaeology kept excavating, but it's off the record. Another ritual of asking forgiveness was conducted before the actual construction could start on February 14. As the first bricks were laid, a team composed of Svayambhū priests, UNESCO volunteers, and myself worked on removing the thick layers of lime and acrylic paints that covered the 124 stone sculptures on the facade. Some sculptures also needed to be pieced back together, which was done using 2 parts epoxy resins. The stupa was originally built using mud mortar. This material had turned into dust before the earthquake, and it is probably one of the reasons why the structure had collapsed. After the earthquake, the government of Nepal requested heritage monuments to be built with a mixture of lime and brick dust. It is therefore with this material, often considered to have been introduced in the country during the 19th century, that our masons rebuilt the structure. On this image, the reconstruction is already well advanced, and I am seen here verifying the proper placement of the freshly cleaned stone sculptures. The original outer and inner layouts had to be followed as much as possible. The archaeological records were therefore used as guidelines throughout the reconstruction. Everything was rebuilt with traditional Ma'apa bricks, and we also tried to reuse the old ones that allowed it. You can see here one of the inner mandalas cavities about to be covered with new stone slabs. As I mentioned earlier, we uncovered nearly 240,000 small clay objects, as well as more than 350 individual artifacts, such as jewelries and statues. For those objects that were documented during the excavation phase, their exact fine context were known, and it was possible to replace them in their original location. Others, for which the archaeological context was unknown, were placed in cavities that we created in the upper part of the structure. You can see in this short clip the replacing, or rather the pouring of clay statues inside the mandalas cavities. And actually we had some visitors of the site who asked us to put all the tsatsas like up like this, but we would still be doing it. And it was the priest's decision to just pour it like this. And here are the 9 pits, or navakundas, with their original contents before being sealed with stone slabs. On this other picture is Saroj Bhattacharya installing the inner terracotta sculptures in the recreated cavities. Lime powder was poured over the statues to stabilize them in it, and because we observed that chunks of lime covered the sculptures and that it was most probably how they were placed originally. This is the stupa near the end of its construction before its plastering. And here is another illustration of the reconstruction work. To the right is our master mason Siddhi Kumar Awal using a mixture of lime and brick dust to plaster the facade. And finally, once that the monument was completed, it was time to reinstall the divinity to reside in it. This is done during a ritual called Jivanya Satayegu, which took place on August 23, 2019. And this is the stupa after its completion. And as concluding remarks, I must say that this was but an overview of the many topics that can be discussed in relation to these monuments and the artifacts that we were able to document. Archaeology proved to be a most useful tool in this project, as it provided a methodology to document the architecture and the objects, which then served as a guideline when we rebuilt the stupa. Furthermore, this was the first post-earthquake archaeological operation carried in 2015. The fact that it concerned a stupa also makes it a unique project, since very few Himalayan stupas have been so far scientifically excavated. And that brings us to the end, and I thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, now it is on, yes. Thank you very much, Dr. David Andolfatto. This was really illuminating, I think, for a lot of us, about an aspect that we normally don't think so much about. We circumambulate the stupas, but might not think a lot what is inside. I myself have participated in consecrations of new stupas, where you also place a lot of objects, but I was ignorant about these stupas that I've seen many times. So thank you very much for that. And I would like to start with a question of maybe a larger nature. A lot of the students and scholars who come to Rangjung Geshe Institute and who stay with the topic of studying Buddhist philosophy and language for many years, sometimes for the rest of their lives, they do that because out of a certain passion, yeah. And I think for any kind of research, including yours, one needs this fire that leads you along. So I'd like you to share a little bit what your passion is and how you came to this project, if that is not too personal.
Okay. So what happened is that UNESCO, the head of UNESCO office, Christian Manard, at that time, 5 days after the earthquake, he called in an emergency meeting at the UNESCO office, and he knew me from before because I worked on Buddhist monuments here. And Thomas Schrom, who's here, also worked on Itumbaha, so we had different projects, and a few of us were there. I don't know, Renu and Manjari, you were there as well, right? Yeah. So yeah, they hired us to like start work and start training people and having teams. So Renu and Manjari were architects working in different sites, Sanku and different places, and I was in charge for Svayambhū. The fire, as you saw with the inscription, the reliquary casket, we kind of had this pressure of like making things properly, because there is a curse if you don't do it properly. So that's also one reason why we had all the rituals and all this. But yeah, and also Svayambhū is a place that is really difficult not to be connected with. Yeah.
Thank you. And I'd like to invite everyone to ask questions. Olaf has a mic. I have a mic, please.
Thank you for your great talk.
Thank you.
I've seen this stupa as a child, and I've been very interested in it. And the unique feature is the Padasarthana figures, as you mentioned. Like that's now what we can see the stone images. So my question is, how many kind of the Padasarthana terracotta figure like this one did you find inside? And another small comment is that the big statue at the foreside are not the Chatur Maharaj. So this is also, I find it a unique feature of this Chaitya, that in almost all Chaitya, there are Chatur Maharaj in the 4 direction, but here they have like the 4 Dikpalas. So among the set of the 8 directional Dikpalas, they only like created 4 of them, and one of them is Kubera. So that's small comment, as because I'm into iconography. And so my question is basically, how many terracotta figure of Padasarthana do you find?
Good question. We have, as far as I can remember, 16. So there weren't as many as the stone sculptures. That probably reflect the fact that it was destroyed at some point, and they kept the ones that were still usable and worshipable, let's say. But yeah, I was also hoping that we would find more terracottas. But I mean, you can see the style. These are not museum pieces, but I mean they're like super high quality terracotta sculptures. So yeah, about like a dozen.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Erica, if you want to ask your question, you can unmute yourself.
Hi. I loved the talk. I'm at home. Sorry, I'm not feeling well. I guess I was here for the earthquake, and it was upsetting to see the stupa here damaged. But what was extraordinary was to be able to see it rebuilt and to live through all the different rituals. You were sort of saying there was a space like for breathing, that they said maybe breathing. I know here they talk about there's a tree that's usually placed in stupas, and it's usually considered like the backbone, and I think they call it in Tibetan the Tsokshing, like the life force. And I was wondering if maybe in not breathing in a normal, breathing with your lungs, but maybe breathing in a Vajrayana context is what it might be related to, like with the backbone. And how does anybody there know how to practice?
No, we can hear you.
You can hear me?
Yeah. I'm trying to look for okay, so that's actually, yeah, the central cavity, like started from this one and went all the way. So yeah, in Newar it's called Yasin, Yasti in Sanskrit, as far as I know. So Westerners called it the axis mundi, but that's a bit weird. Yeah, it could be related to this, but technically when we see the drawing, like a cut of a stupa, ideally you would have this central beam going all the way down, and here we have this, so we know that it couldn't go too much deep into the building because we have these cavities. And in fact, we found a piece of this wooden beam that was actually in the Gajur, the top part, the Chatra Valley. It was broken. It was obviously too small for what it should. I mean, it has a structural role as well as a symbolic role, and or technically it should go all the way down. In the central, in the other monuments that I show, where is it? Maybe it was before. It's probably related to this, but this breathing interpretation is also matches with the fact that the monuments are alive and they have how to say, they're an entity. But yeah, that's probably related also to this fact that you have a central cosmic thing in the middle. Yeah.
I just didn't know if it might have to do with Vajrayana practice in terms of the subtle body breathing, sort of, possibly, as opposed to, like lung breathing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so I'm more of an archaeologist than a religious study person, possibly, but I guess one could also find it in Buddhist monuments, and we found it. The one that I showed before, we found it in this at the base, in the foundations of this monument, Anantapur, which is, as far as I know, not related to any tantric practices, Vajrayana, or anything specific. It was more a memorial to Pratap Malla and his wife. So, yeah.
Were they consecrated?
Yeah, they are consecrated. I guess they're worshipped.
Okay, as long as it's consecrated, there'll be a living deity present.
Yeah, there is, but then yeah, please, I would love to hear about this theory.
I was thinking of that while you were talking. That's all.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. Thank you.
All right, seems like there's a question in the chat. I'll just read it out. Thank you. Very interesting talk about Nepalese-Tibetan connections. Do you think the things you discovered that reflect a part of a long-term continuity of such connections in Buddhism, art, etc., in the Nepal Valley?
Yeah, totally. We often talk about Kathmandu as one of the Silk Road corridors. Actually, it's a UNESCO thing now. It's one of the 3 Nepalese corridors for the Silk Road. And usually we talk about it, but we don't have that many like material elements to talk about it. Like the material is not there. And here, to me, that's the Silk Road, although the word is a bit, I don't know, it's overused. It is definitely a representation of the Silk Road, but also at the micro-historical point of view, like the history of this person, this Tamrakar. And I really look at these Newar traders as adventurers who, like, I don't know if he got the Indian coins from India personally and like traveled there, but in any case, all the material really shows connections to India, British India. Where are the coins? And Tibet. I mean, this is just, it's not that big, but it's such a beautiful object. So yeah, definitely it shows these connections, and unfortunately we don't have documented stupas for previous periods. This is the modern period, or late medieval if you want. But it would be interesting to see more stuff from other monuments being excavated when needed. Like in the Svayambhū Stūpa itself, there must be a huge wealth of information in it, but of course we're not gonna just look inside.
Okay, thank you so much. Julia, you have a question? Or
in the beginning of your talk, you mentioned Shantipur. Before, I love to go there and see the paintings, and I was always wondering what is happening. Is it ever going to open? Can you tell us a little bit more about it? Now you said it is planned to have paintings again.
Yeah.
Is the idea to repaint more or less what was there before, or something new?
So since we did this thing, removing the paintings, we started having a conversation with the Buddhacharyas and the Federation of Svayambhū Management Conservation. there are two options. They either bring back the mural paintings in the temple, in this first room that UNESCO actually also rebuilt, financed, provided some expertise also. Either we bring back the paintings and complete what's gone. But the thing is that, and the other option is that we build a replica of this room at the National Museum where the paintings are now. We build a replica, we put the ancient paintings there, and then we bring in contemporary artists and make the new ones in Shantipur. So this is the one I'm pushing for, because then more people can sit at the National Museum, and it also like stimulates the art today. So right now I started discussing with the people from Svayambhū and the National Museum and some potential Newari donors. So we're just starting. I'm not doing it on behalf of anyone, but it's just trying to push for it. And so far, most people are actually for this second option of making new paintings. One question though is that the level of quality was really bad actually in most of the paintings. This is the best piece of painting in the whole Shantipur, but the rest was not so good. It was restored over time using like not so good materials, and meaning acrylic paints and all this. Where was I going? So now there's one side where we have the Darara Tower, Sundara. And the question is, do we repaint these mural paintings with a view of Kathmandu today? Because there are views of like Kathmandu with the cute houses like in the 50s or whatnot. But do we do it as it is now? Do we put all these lovely buildings, all this lovely architecture we have now? So that's also one question that like the community obviously has to figure out, because it's their decision, obviously. There also, some people also propose to replace the Sanskrit script that was used, the Devanagari script, replace it by Prachalit Lipi. So there are conversations about these things, and I guess I will have to involve Alex van Hoospat in the conversation, because he's the specialist for this place, obviously.
Okay, thank you. So is that going to be your next project, or what is your next project?
Next project is too many. No, I work on Nepali tattoos right now, traditional tattoo traditions, and it's totally not archaeology, but it's endangered, so we have to document it. Yeah. Welcome. All good. Wait, actually, somebody, Erica, raised their hand. I don't know if
Sorry. What I noticed in a lot of the Tibetan monasteries after the earthquake, they when they repainted, they didn't paint on the walls. They painted on canvas that's now attached to the walls, so they don't lose the paintings.
Mm-hmm.
In case of future earthquakes.
Yeah, well, the Newar tradition is actually to use a rice husk. You can see it here on this slide a little bit. There are two different types of rice husk, different grains of purity, and the purest one is the top layer that's used for the paint. That's how it's done traditionally. So that's probably how they're gonna do. But before that, the painters will actually have to paint on cotton to just make kind of a draft, kind of like a bilampo that we have in Newar monasteries. So yeah, I guess they will go with the Newar tradition and not the. I think the one you're referring to, it's a very modern way of doing. I saw it in Mugu also, where people also just printed mural paintings. They printed them on the plastic or paper, and they just plaster it. And yeah, that's not very traditional, I would say.
Yeah, I think the paintings are traditional, but the method probably not, because these aren't old monasteries. These are relatively recently built monasteries.
Yep. And it's probably also very much cheaper.
I'm sorry if I missed this when you mentioned it, but and maybe if you don't know, maybe others here do know. The tsatsas, the reliquary, like the votives that are inside in a vast number in the stupa, are these do they contain the ashes of the? Are they mixed with the ashes of the
tsatsas?
Yeah, the cremated patron? Or
Good question. We don't know because we didn't. As far as I know, in the Buddhist context of Kathmandu Valley, when you do tsatsas with the ashes, asti tsatsa, satsa actually, no tassa in a way, you make 5 satsas, and with the ashes or grinded bones, and then you put them in a tirtha near the water, and you just release them in the put them in the water, so there's no trace of them. And it was one question I had also, if it's done with the ashes, but the sheer number of objects. Usually when I did a postdoc on satsas and trying to identify bones or ashes with microscopes and all this in satsas that are in the museums in France, just to identify their context. And the thing is that even with modern techniques, it's really hard to find with a spectrometric analysis and all this, it's really hard to locate bones. And the thing is that usually, I saw Tamang people doing it, and they just have like this much bone, they grind, and if you make 100,000 tsatsas, it's just gonna be lost. But it's something that we were thinking about when we were excavating. They're not directly funerary tsatsas, but because of their context, they are made funerary. But that's a good question.
And there's that term. Where is the term? You mentioned in Newari, it's tatsa.
Tassa. Tassa means mold in Newari, but you correct me, Manjari. Tassa, yeah.
And what's the provenance of this term? Is that an indigenous Newar term?
Yeah.
So did the Tibetans get this term from the Newars then?
As far as I'm in the wrong position here to
Question for the group.
But tsa means the act of stamping, right? As far as I know. So it's just you repeat tsa. That's far. And there are different pronunciation, but maybe people are gonna shout in the chat. But there are different pronunciation in Tibetan, the satsa, tatsa, and all this. So I use the tsatsa spelling, which is one that was used by a person who did their PhD thesis on it. So.
Thank you. Just a very quick question. When you mentioned that some of the old paintings are now at the National Museum, which National Museum are you referring to?
The Chowni Museum, down the Svayambhū.
Ah, I see.
They're in a room collecting dust, unfortunately.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any more questions?
As an archaeologist, what do you recommend? Do you recommend to put those paintings back in its original place?
The Shantipur ones?
Yeah.
As I said, I push for the second option, which is to create a new space at the museum where we put the old ones, because now we totally rebuilt Shantipur. And I just realized this today when I was next to Shantipur. I was, okay, we use the same measurements, but maybe the walls are a bit thicker. So if we bring back the old ones, then maybe the paintings, I don't know, but there's a possibility that the paintings are actually larger than the existing walls. So we would have to cut on the sides of the paintings. So that's not something we want. At least not me, but I don't take the decisions. Also, so right now the Buddhacharyas they really want it to be done because they're only doing 3 pujas, big pujas per year, and usually they do more. And they say it's incomplete because the paintings are not there, but for some reason nobody really pushed for or did anything. So personally, I would prefer to have the new ones because also it gives more dynamic to the art in the valley, and we have money in the Newari community has money. We have some rich people who can donate, so why not? Just like the old days.
And another question is, so I think he has cleared the idea that how particular ideal is put in particular place in those niches. What about the small idols that are put on the upper levels?
It's the Buddhas. Oh, why is that working? Yeah, it's the Buddhas on top here. I don't know if you can see. These ones, you mean?
Yeah.
These are the Buddhas. And all the levels here, it's these asanas and mudras from the Kriya Samgraha. And fun fact is that so now when it's finished, some private donors donated a new gajor. So they actually covered the stone one with gilt metal. And they also put an inscription with their name on it, but that was a big fuss because you cannot put your name above the Buddha. Yeah, so now it looks actually better. But yeah, it's the Buddhas on top, and below it's the Chatur Maharaj and Ashtamangala.
Okay, so maybe this will be the last question for the night.
James.
Hi there. Sorry for being so late.
It's okay.
James here. Did you say you got into Shantipur? Did you go in the
first room?
Oh well, yeah.
I saw the other rooms,
but behind the door.
I saw the behind the door, but I'm not allowed to talk about it. No, so that's all. Yeah,
I'm sure you're very aware of all of us who've been here for so long. I always wondered about whether it's myth or reality that there's a cave and tunnel that goes all the way to here, to Bodha.
Yeah.
Right? And I forgot which Raja entered, and then anyway, could you elaborate anything about that?
No, but actually that's also one thing that took a lot of time for the reconstruction of Shantipur, is that all the masons need to have a special initiation, a special diksha for going inside. So that takes some time, and the painters will also have to have a special initiation, although they will remain in the main room. But it looks similar to the drawings.
So you can't talk about it, but
No.
could you say
No.
how far you got?
Sign, I can sign. No, I don't know like huge secrets for real. I mean, but it's just sorry. You came in just for that, James.
I was 13 minutes late. It's 6 o'clock. 5 o'clock.
But so James actually provided the drawing, a painting of a view of Svayambhū from early 20th century, I think, or late 19th century, where we can see this Tashi Gomang Stūpa in detail. So, and if any of you are interested, Thomas and we published a small booklet with UNESCO. They're available for free at the UNESCO office, and they're also online.
Do we have time for one more short question?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Thank you very much. From your slides, I can see there's different statues and all this stuff. But one thing I kind of quite different from the Tibetan stupas is that either like he didn't see or anything, that there's no scriptures or transcript like a Buddhist, in this case, Nivari Buddhist transcript that wrote inside and usually goes into the stupas. And is that something doesn't happen, doesn't exist in these stupas, or it's just Nivari thing that they don't put
thank you. Actually, that's a good question. These temples that we just talked about, so they are consecrated and all, and inside they have it. They have these rolls with scriptures. I tried to take pictures of it, but I was not allowed in the end. But the thing is that since this stupa, the Maṅgal Bahudvāra Caitya, was most probably renovated over time, and that people like opened it with probably not as much care as one would want. Maybe they found it and they just took it out, sold it. I don't know, but it's a good question. They should be some, but since it's really at the junction between Newari and Tibetan traditions, could also explain that people were like picking things from one side or another, but Nepalis also tend to do it. So no, it's a good question actually. Thank you for asking. But none.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.